Hi everyone, it's Dr. Katie and welcome to this episode of Tranquil Tuesdays. And this is a special episode. As you may have noticed, I'm not alone today, and I would like to take a minute to introduce my special guest, Shawna Percy.
Hi everyone.
So Shawna, do you just want to take a minute to tell everyone just sort of who you are?
Sure. So I'm the founder and a certified trainer with an organization called Life Voice, and we do suicide prevention trainings. So Safe Talk, Assist, if you're familiar with them, teaches people how to do suicide intervention skills, and I also do suicide intervention. So this is my whole field, is the world of suicide prevention.
Just so really excited to have you here tonight because through November what we've been talking about and what I've been trying to talk about is really is men's mental health. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is suicide is actually the leading cause of death for young adult men. And a lot of people seem to think it's accidents, and it's just really sad that this is a preventable cause of death, and one that's not getting a lot of attention, and I think something that has a lot of stigma attached to it. And the more I learn about suicide, the more I realize how little I knew about suicide.
There are never-ending things to learn about with this category, for sure.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's one of those topics where people have a lot of misconceptions, and so I'm just really happy to have you here tonight, and hopefully we can discuss some things that people need to know about this topic. And I do hope that for those of you joining us tonight, that if you do have questions for Shawna, that you'll type them in the comment box as we go. I'll try and ask as we go along if there's something that I think might be important to you. But this is a challenging topic, and we're just really hoping to break down some of that stigma tonight, so that people feel more comfortable talking about suicide.
That in itself is life-changing and life-saving. But when we feel that we can't openly talk about the things that we're struggling with, it just, in my experience, puts a weight on people's chests that they can't shake, and it can be really debilitating or life-threatening.
Yeah, as a practitioner that works in the mental health field, I know something that I'm always asking my patients, when I meet them, is I'm asking about mood, and I'm asking about any sort of, I'm screening for depression, and if I feel that there's risk for depression, I'm then screening for suicide and asking about that. And this is something that my understanding is that you help people in the community do this type of work just out and about in their daily lives.
Yeah, exactly. So part of what I do in the trainings is to teach people to look for signs that someone might be at risk of suicide wherever they might find them. And sometimes when it comes to those who are struggling with depression, in some ways they might be at higher risk, but not everyone who is living with depression is going to struggle with thoughts of suicide, and not everyone who is struggling with those thoughts is going to die by suicide, but we do know that there can be an increased risk, and so it's really important for us to have that conversation and to screen for it. And we often refer to suicide as being like a mountain that somebody is facing, and there's some kind of obstacle that they're not sure how to get on the other side of. And often people feel like they're stuck between these two options of living life which looks impossible right now, or dying. And we want to come along and say, actually there's a third option, and that's to just stay safe for now. And we talk about that, and it's a way of breaking life down small. And sometimes that mountain that people are facing is depression, or mental illness. Sometimes it's life circumstance.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting in the way that you talk about depression, that I think I just wanted to highlight to make sure that everyone caught it, was how you talk about the individual not necessarily wanting to die, but just not knowing how to live anymore.
Yep.
And I find that this is, common in those contemplating suicide, is that it's not so much that they want to die, it's that they just don't know how to live like this anymore. And I think that's a really important difference for people to understand.
Absolutely.
Is that, life circumstances have or mental illness have created a situation that's hard to live through and hard to live in. And so when we encounter someone that seems to be struggling with this, Shawna, how would you suggest that someone watching this today would then go and approach that person?
The best thing that we can do is to start a conversation with the person, to let them know that we're paying attention to them, their life matters to us, and we're noticing things. And if we think that those things might be linked to a risk of suicide, to ask that question: are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about ending your life? And when we ask a really direct and clear question like that, it helps that person who might be struggling with thoughts of suicide to know that, you know what, we just put this table out on the topic. It's okay to talk to us about this topic. Did I just say put this table on the topic?
Put this topic on the table.
You know what I mean.
Open the door for the conversation.
That's right. Exactly. So the more direct that we can be, we're letting them know that they can also be direct with us. And that in itself can relieve a lot of pain that people are living in. And as we're able to connect and open up conversation around that, often people who are struggling with these thoughts by themselves feel like they're alone. But then we enter this conversation with them, and all of a sudden they're not alone. And that can produce this future hope that, hey, maybe I don't need to struggle with this completely by myself in the future either.
Absolutely. And for people who are afraid to address suicide directly, I know some of the fears that I've heard of are around, like, what if I don't know what to do after what they tell me? I think that can be a barrier for people. Unfortunately, even I think some clinicians that are just afraid of the answer to that. How do you think we can go about overcoming those types of fears?
It's such a good question. And I think a significant piece of that is cultural. So I'll just speak to the culture that I grew up in. And the culture I grew up in basically taught me from the time I was little that when somebody has a problem, I need to fix it. I have to find a solution to that. And so that can feel really intimidating when you think somebody might be struggling with suicide, because how do you fix a thing like that? So the good news is that we don't need to fix the problems that have brought the person to this place. What most people need, if not all people, is not to be fixed. They need to be heard. Yeah. So I'll often ask, when I have a group of participants in my trainings, I'll ask them, you know, if you're really struggling with something and you're meeting with a friend, do you want that friend to fix you? And they'll say no. And then I say, do you want that friend to really hear you and see you where you're at? And they go, yeah.
That's such great advice, Shawna, because it's so true. What I think we all want really in life is just to be seen and be heard for who we are and where we're at and what we're going through, and to be able to hold that space for someone and be able to have them share really whatever's going on in their life. You know, if you're suspecting that someone's not doing well, whether or not they're having suicidal thoughts, I mean, even just the fact that you're there for them and you say, you know, what's going on, and having that caring space, that's what they need.
Absolutely. Yeah. And imagine, as we become better listeners in general, then if people are feeling heard earlier on with whatever they're struggling with, some of the challenges that they're facing won't become so magnified that then they start thinking about suicide. So just listening in general is a great preventative action that we can take, and it's something anyone can do, and it can be life-saving.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I love how you brought that back into prevention and really just addressing these things early on. I know that that's one of the theories as to why depression gets so extreme in men, that they often do end up in suicide, is that we live in a culture where a lot of men don't feel that they can share this, that it's not important, or that it'll just go away if they ignore it. There's a lot of false beliefs around mood, around like for women as well, but I think especially in men in our culture, it's really struggling.
Right. Sometimes it's thought that men have a higher rate of suicide because they have access to more lethal means, but actually a significant portion of that could be, again, a cultural piece of us perhaps in general terms not encouraging men, and starting from childhood, right?
Absolutely.
To be open with their emotions, to be able to talk through things, to be help-seeking. I really love, my sister lived in Cambridge for a while, and she was right by a park, and it was a very Sikh neighborhood. And often when I would drive by that park, I would see a picnic table full of Sikh men. And I thought, wow, that's just something that I don't see in the culture that I grew up in.
Men having conversations, looking at each other.
Right, working through things with one another. But here's the good news. So, we can change these things. These are things that are in our power to shift in our culture and to start shifting at a younger generation. So, although men may be 4 times more likely to suicide than women, the good news is that we're actually seeing the rates of suicide in boys drop.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah, so something is shifting there, and people are paying more and more attention to not only youth preventative measures, but specifically focusing on boys, and we're seeing that it's making an impact. So there's a lot of hope there.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really happy to hear that. As much as we'd like to see these preventative measures hitting all age groups, but I think starting with cultural changes and making suicide an okay topic and suicidal thoughts an okay topic to talk about earlier on in life, that really does leave room for people to seek help when they need it.
Absolutely. And just from myself, I will say that men, you have such an important role in our society, in our families, in our work lives. Your life matters. And I'll just to give you a little piece of where I'm coming from with that. I am a widow, so my first husband died by suicide 6 years ago. So this topic is really close to home for me. And when I look back, one of the things that I recognize is that I'm not quite sure that we were communicating to my husband, and also just to men in general, how much value you have in our lives. And so this is something that I really love to share with people and to remind them, because we don't always do a great job of that. But your absence is felt when it's not there, and you are irreplaceable.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, a really important message. If anybody has any questions for Shawna, you can feel free to pop them up in the comments, and we'll see them and answer them. And while we're waiting for any questions to come up, Shawna, do you just want to tell me a little bit about how Life Voice works and how this work happens out in the community?
Absolutely. There's 2 main things that we do. So one is the training, and so if people go onto lifevoice.ca, they can search for trainings there. And so we do trainings in the Guelph area, but we actually travel all around Ontario and even outside the province. But the other thing that we do that I think is really significant and can be life saving is we provide free downloadable crisis support sheets on our website. I'm a huge fan of getting resources into people's hands. I think a lot of pain could be alleviated earlier by getting people connected to supports like yourself who can help them. But a lot of people don't realize how many supports actually exist in our community. And sometimes those supports are formal supports, like a doctor, a hospital, a crisis line, things like that. And some of our other supports are informal, like a friend or even a pet, something that's life-giving to us and helps create connection between us and some other living thing. So some of those ideas are on the crisis support sheets, and we have crisis support sheets for all sorts of things.
Wonderful. So what we'll do is we'll put a link below this video so that people can head over to the Life Voice website and access those crisis supports. So if you or someone you know needs those, there'll be a link below this video. As soon as we sign off here, I'll make sure that that's up for everybody.
That's great. Thank you. So one other thing that I'll add on to that, because you'll find that there's a local list for Guelph, but there are also national crisis lines on there. And the reason why I point that out is because if you think about somebody like a first responder, really intense job, sees a lot of things, sometimes traumatic, and sometimes when an individual is working on the front lines, it can be really hard for them to go to the communities that they serve for the support that they need. And that's where national supports can be of significant use, because now somebody still has options. They can reach out to a national crisis line, and it's anonymous, but the most important thing is that they're connecting with somebody else and they're talking. They're being heard.
Absolutely. That's really great to know. All right. So I don't have any more questions for you, Shawna, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And for all the work that you do in the community. I just think that it's clear to me that your mission here and what you're doing is really just going to help so many people live. And I really,
That's my hope.
I really think it is, and I think that's such an important service for Guelph and for Ontario, and I think for this world really. It just when we lift people up that are down, I think it just lifts up our whole planet.
Well, thank you. And it's life-giving to me too. It's an honor, and anytime I get to do an intervention, I just have to say, you are my heroes, because these are the people who are fighting the dragons day in and day out, and every day that you choose to live, it feeds my soul, and I see the battles that you're fighting, and thank you. You're incredible.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to close this off here. I'm so into this topic, I can't even tell you what we're going to be talking about next week, but I'll be here again next week for Tranquil Tuesdays, and you can look for the topic on my Facebook page. It's posted every Tuesday. So I hope to see you next week, and again, thank you to Shawna for being here.
My pleasure. Good night.